Hey guys, Killix here, multi-rank win in Arena, Mythic Plus, and the #1 Virgin Collector in North America. In the War Within Season 1, I finished as the #1 Holy Paladin worldwide in Blitz, and in Season 2 I locked out another rank 1 title. I've competed at the highest levels in every form of WoW, Arenas, RBGs, Shuffles, Blitz, Mythic Plus, Raiding, and even Collecting. Today I'm bringing you the most comprehensive Holy Paladin PvP guide for the War Within. Whether you're brand new to the class or chasing your next title, this guide will walk you step by step through everything you need to dominate every form of content. Before we get started guys, keep in mind this is going to be an extremely long in-depth guide. I'm going to try to keep it under an hour, but scroll down below and use the timestamps below to jump to any section of the guide that you want. I'm going to be trying to go over as many different aspects of Holy Paladin and PvP as I possibly can. Holy Paladin is what I'd call a hybrid melee range healer. You're not really sitting in the backline spam casting. Your playstyle revolves more around burst healing, proactive cooldown management, and bringing some of the best utility inside the game. The hero talent system this expansion, you have two completely different playstyles that you can pick from. You have Lightsmith and Herald of the Sun. Both are strong, both are viable at high rating, and they each reward different types of decision making. Now, historically speaking, Paladins always start a season feeling a little bit undertuned, but as the season goes on, especially by the mid to late point, they usually climb right back up to the top, and Season 3 is no different than that. Right now, Holy Paladin is doing really well across all content. It's not the #1 strongest healer in any specific bracket, but it's absolutely viable at the highest level of gameplay in every single form of content in this game. Paladin's strength starts with insane burst healing. Holy Shock and Word of Glory can bring someone back from 1% health to 100% health instantly in one global. Defensively, we're also stacked. We have Blessing of Protection, Sacrifice, Spellwarding, Divine Shield, Lay on Hands. These can all turn games into your favor. Our utility is just as strong. Freedom, Hammer, Justice, Cleanse, Aura Mastery, Searing Glare. Plus our defensives again, and shut down enemy win conditions outright if used properly. Add Plate Armor to the mix and Divine Protection, and we're one of the tankiest, most durable healers into melee cleave specifically. Rarely the first kill target though. The main exceptions are versus like Assassination Rogues, Balance Druids, and Elemental Shamans, who can quickly swap and punish if you are in a bad position. So you always want to stay in a good position versus certain comps and classes. Holy Paladin isn't without weakness though. The biggest is mobility. Divine Steed is our only real movement tool here, and it always feels like it's on cooldown. With Hollow Ground gone, we're looking slower than ever before. Blessing of Freedom can help, but it's easily purged, has one charge, and a long cooldown, leaving us immobile into purge heavy teams. We're also extremely cooldown reliant. Misusing one major cooldown often means losing instantly. On top of that, we're very predictable. Everyone knows our gameplay revolves around Avenging Wrath windows and Hodge setups, which are very easy to anticipate and predict. CC vulnerability is another major issue. Outside of sack, bubble, or bop, we have almost no way to stop CC. Our short range kick is rarely ever effective, and burning big defensive just to deny CC is rarely ever worth it. Compare that to priests with death and fade on such a short cooldown, monks with port, druids and shamans that can spam shade shift, or even evokers now with their new CC immune shroud that they can literally spam the entire game. Paladins simply lack those tools. Because of this, the real skill expression comes from your positioning throughout the match, baiting interrupts, and smart defensive trades. This is what separates the average Paladins from those who reach the top. When it comes to gearing, the priority is simple. Stack as much mastery as possible, with versatility as your secondary stat. That means that you want to be crafting nearly every single piece of your gear to maximize the highest amount of mastery if you want to min-max, as crafted gear gives more mastery than PvP vendor gear, and some PvP vendor gear does not have mastery at all. If you can't get both on every piece early season, just do your best. But the goal is always high mastery plus low burst. Craft engineering bracers late in the season with mastery only on it if possible. You don't care about crafting every piece of gear and you just want to buy the PvP vendor gear, that's fine as well. It's not that drastic unless you're pushing rank 1 titles. Early season prioritize mastery over verse, over crit, over haste in that order until you're able to craft every single piece of gear with Conquest uncapped. For tier set, the 2-piece bonus is mandatory. I'd advise not running 4-piece as it is just extremely weak in PvP for Herald. Use helmet and legs as your 2 pieces for 2-piece, right? So if you have the option, get helmet, legs first. And if you decide to run 4-piece, then use chest as your crafted off piece. Now let's talk hero talents, because this is really where Holy Paladin's identity splits. Lightsmith is what I like to call the high skill, high reward option. This build revolves around rotating holy armaments with spells like Holy Shock, Judgment, Avenging Crusader, Bulwark, and most importantly, Sacred Weapon, which is arguably one of the most overpowered abilities in PvP content at the moment. Sacred Weapon's health redistribution is one of the most unique mechanics in this entire game. When used properly, it can make your team nearly unkillable. You can literally line of sight the enemy, avoid CC, and just heal yourself for a few globals while Sacred Weapon spreads that healing to your partner and redistributes your health between each other, ping-ponging back and forth. It feels broken when it works. Add that to the fact that Avenging Wrath allows you to control Sacred Weapon procs every minute, and you get those incredibly frequent power spikes and defensives. In the right hands, Lightsmith turns you into a fortress that can stabilize situations like no other healer in this game. But here's the catch. It's brutal to play, it feels clunky, it's not fun, and if you overlap cooldowns, mismanaged trades, or mistimed Sacred Weapons, the game just slips out of your hands and you fall behind. It's extremely punishing, very technical, and it takes a lot of awareness and practice to play correctly. That's why I always call Lightsmith the hard mode paladin. The skill ceiling is insanely high, but so is the punishment for mistakes. Now on the other hand, you have Herald of the Sun. This is the hero build I recommend for almost every single person. Herald is smooth, consistent, and much more forgiving. The entire gameplay loop revolves around maximizing Holy Shock uptime, generating holy power, and spending that on Eternal Flames, which is your Word of Glory replacement. You weave in Holy Prisms on cooldown, which got buffed massively this expansion and now hits like a truck for both healing and damage wise. And on top of that, you keep Eternal Flames rolling on yourself for that passive absorb healing through Light of the Martyr. The beauty of Herald is that if you make small mistakes, you can still recover. It works anywhere: Arena, Shuffle, Blitz, Mythic Plus, Raids, and it's the most popular choice across the board in this game. Doesn't have the same crazy carry potential as Lightsmith, but it doesn't need to. Herald gives you a reliable throughput, steady healing pressure, and a much simpler and more friendly learning curve for newer players. So here's my advice. If you're still learning Holy Paladin, start with Herald. Once you've mastered positioning, defensive trades, and timing, then try out Lightsmith. Personally, even at the highest level, playing into top rank 1 teams, I still default to Herald because it's consistent, it's strong, and honestly, it's just way more fun to play. Lightsmith is great if you're absolutely cracked and want to push the skill ceiling higher and higher, but for 95% of players in this game, Herald is the way to go. Before we dive into the full depth of the guide, I need to start with the most important change this season, and that's called the Infusion of Light. This passive has been completely reworked, and it changes the way we play Holy Paladin drastically. Infusion of Light no longer has anything to do with critical strike. Instead, every Holy Shock you cast has a flat 10% chance to proc it. That chance applies separately to each Holy Shock, meaning that abilities that fire off multiple Holy Shocks like Rising Sunlight, Divine Toll, or Herald's Second Sunrise hero talent all have multiple chances to trigger Infusion of Light. So why does this matter? Because now Infusion actually makes Flash of Light a real spell in PvP. Before, Flash of Light was basically worthless, a slow, weak cast that wasn't worth the time. But with Infusion procs, it becomes instant, costs almost no mana, and heals for 200% more. That's huge. Infusion also buffs Holy Light by 45%, and Judgment now prevents 150% extra damage while generating 2 holy power. But in almost every case, you want to spend your infusions on that instant Flash of Light. The only exception are when you have Hand of Divinity up and you get those 2 instant Holy Light casts. In that case, it's fine to dump infusions into those. Or if you're silenced by a Priest's Silence, a Rogue's Garrote, or a Druid Beam, you can still cast Judgment while you're silenced. So it's okay to throw infusions into Judgments during those windows to squeeze out some more value from the greater Judgment's damage mitigation. There are also a couple of rules to keep in mind though. First, always try to use your infusion procs before casting more Holy Shocks, unless you've got a Rising Sunlight proc that's about to expire. Rising Sunlight always takes priority because you never want to waste one proc. The reason you want to dump infusions early is simple. They don't stack beyond 2 charges, and if you're sitting on 1 infusion, cast another Holy Shock and it procs Infusion of Light again, just wasted the previous proc. So use them as soon as you can, especially on beacon targets, since we have talents that give Flash of Light even more healing when used on someone with beacon. In short, Infusion of Light completely changes our rotation. It's no longer a throwaway mechanic, it's something you actually actively play around, and it's a big part of why Holy Paladin feels so strong this season. Beacon placement is one of the most important parts of playing Holy Paladin well. In most games, the standard setup is very simple. 1 beacon on each one of your DPS. That way, no matter who takes damage, your healing is always feeding value through both beacons. There are exceptions though. Sometimes you'll be under constant pressure yourself. Certain comps love swapping the Holy Paladins. In those matchups, you may need to put 1 beacon on yourself and 1 on the DPS who's taking the most amount of damage throughout the game. This is rare, but it's absolutely the right way to play when you're the one being focused. Another thing to keep in mind is how mastery works. Your mastery increases healing based on the proximity of your target. This also applies to beacons. That means you always want your beacons on your players you're actively healing, because it ensures you get benefit from your mastery scaling. You'll always get 100% mastery value when healing yourself, because, well, you're literally standing on yourself. But if you're healing a target without a beacon and that target isn't near your beacon partner or you, they won't benefit from your full mastery at all. The result is drastically weaker healing. So the rule of thumb is beacon your DPS by default, adjust if you're the one taking heavy damage, and always keep your beacons where your healing is going. That way you're squeezing maximum value out of both of your talents and your mastery. Now let's talk about Light of the Martyr, because this ties directly into why we never beacon ourselves. The key passive here is that as long as you're above 70% health, your Holy Shock healing is massively buffed. That's why it's so important to always keep yourself topped, ideally staying above 70% health for the entire game. Most of the time this means you'll never want to put a beacon on yourself. If you do, you're creating a problem. Every Holy Shock you cast on yourself not only risks wasting beacon value, but also stacks up absorb shields from Light of the Martyr, which you then have to heal off. Becomes a double negative. You're spending globals on holy power to heal yourself, but you're also constantly putting more absorbs on yourself at the same time. The correct way to manage absorbs is with infusion powered flash of lights, holy lights, or eternal flames. These are efficient, instant, and they clear the absorb without locking you into wasting your main healing spell on yourself. The only time you really consider beacon yourself is when you're under heavy focus and need the extra damage reduction from talents that interact with beacon. And in those moments, yes, you'll sometimes have to Holy Shock yourself just to stay alive, but as a rule of thumb, keep Eternal Flame rolling on yourself for passive healing throughout the game, use Infusion procs on Flash of Light to heal off Martyr absorbs if needed, and avoid Holy Shocking yourself unless it's absolutely necessary. This is one of those subtle gameplay details that separates average Paladins from the great ones. If you're constantly Holy Shocking yourself, you're falling into a trap. If you're managing Martyr absorbs intelligently and keeping yourself healthy with procs and Eternal Flames, you'll free up way more healing for your team and maintain those stronger Holy Shocks when they matter the most. Before we get into the gameplay and talk about the general rules of healing or rotational priorities, you need to understand one very important thing. And this is that there is no fixed rotation for Holy Paladin. Healing is not like DPSing or tanking. You can't just follow a strict script. Every single situation changes what buttons you press, and your job as a healer is to constantly adapt. I get asked all the time, hey, can you do this? Can you make a rotation guide? Can you make a guide on how to heal? Can you make a guide on this? But in reality, that doesn't exist for Holy Paladin. Instead, what you have is a set of general rules and priorities. Learning when to follow these rules, when to break them, how to shift your priority list on the fly is something you only develop through practice and experience in this game. Every bracket of PvP reinforces this. Your rules and priorities can sometimes completely change depending on the environment and the situation. For example, in solo shuffles, dampening ramps up much faster, almost immediately. That means your healing priority shifts much faster as well. You'll often burn through cooldowns on key spells more aggressively than you would in 3v3 arenas. Contrast, 3v3 matches usually start slower, which make things like Infusion of Light, Instant Flash of Lights much stronger and much higher on the priority list. In solo shuffle, dampening kicks in so early that the value of the Infusion of Light diminishes much more quickly than it does in actual 3v3s. Whereas in real 3v3s, it's incredibly powerful because you have more time before healing gets cut down by dampening, for example. That's just one example of the many different examples that you can use for this situation, but it illustrates the bigger point. Your healing rotation is never static. It always changes. It changes constantly with the pace of the game, the bracket, your opponents, and even your teammates. The only real way to master it is to practice every single day, internalize the rule of priority, and refine your instincts through experience and just constantly playing and improving. At the end of the day, there's no set way to heal. There's only your ability to adapt and learn on the fly and just constantly try to improve by playing the game. The next time you experience something that you did worse in yesterday, you'll do better this time. Now, let's talk about openers, because every single match as a Holy Paladin is going to start the same exact way. Your job at the start of the game is to set up your cooldowns and establish pressure without getting caught. You're fighting against a stealth class, think rogues or druids or hunters or mages or anything like that that's invis. The opener looks like this. You start by casting Tears Deliverance, then pop Hand of Divinity, then you throw Summer on one of your DPS teammates. After that, you cast Holy Prism on one of your partners to try and knock out the stealth class out of stealth. From there, you just start Holy Shock baiting out Infusion of Light procs. The goal is to line up one of those two free Holy Lights from Hand of Divinity with Infusion proc so that your first two heals of the match are massive instant casts that can immediately stabilize your team. On top of this, if you're extending tiers with those instant Holy Lights, so even if your partners are at full health, for example, if those instant Holy Lights are about to expire, just use them to extend your tiers. If you're not fighting a stealth class, the cadence shifts a little bit. You open by throwing out an early Holy Shock to fish for an Infusion of Light proc. If you land one right away, you can go straight into Hand of Divinity, the Tears Deliverance, the Summer on your DPS, or on yourself if you want to get aggressive. Sometimes I like to slip in a second Holy Shock right before Tears to give myself even more chances at an opener Infusion of Light proc in the beginning of the game. The key thing is to make sure you're doing all of this while line of sighting the enemy team so you don't get stopped or CC'd mid setup. Now, don't overthink the Infusion of Light procs in the opener. They're great if you land them, but they're just a bonus. Your two free Holy Lights from Hand of Divinity are already extremely powerful on their own. If you get Infusion procs on top of it, that's when the healing feels almost unfair with those Holy Lights. But other than that, just get your opener right properly every single time and you'll do much better in the first minute of the game because you'll be set up better for it. Avenging Wrath, aka Wings, and Divine Toll. These two cooldowns are hands down the most important buttons in your entire healing toolkit. Anytime you press either one, you instantly gain Rising Sunlight, which makes your next two Holy Shocks fire off 2 additional times. That means every Holy Shock turns into a mini healing nuke, while also giving you way more chances to proc Infusion of Light. But here's the mistake I see a lot of newer Paladins make, and even veteran Paladins. They stack Wings and Divine Toll together. On paper, that sounds insane. Let's pop everything all at once, but in reality, it's actually a waste. The reason is that Rising Sunlight stacks don't last forever, and if you pop both at the same time, you almost always end up overcapping and losing procs before you can use them. Not only does this cut your value in half, it also burns through your biggest cooldowns too quickly. Instead, you'll want to spread them out. Think of Wings and Divine Toll as two separate power spikes in your healing toolkit. Wings gives you sustained healing and consistent Rising Sunlight uptime every 2 minutes, not counting Awakening procs, while Divine Toll is more of a sharp burst that you can weave in to extend Rising Sunlights if your stacks are about to expire, or press after you've run out of Rising Sunlight procs from Wings, or if you need to do a little bit of AoE healing and single target burst healing with those Rising Sunlight procs. By keeping them separate, you make sure you always have a major pool coming up soon, which keeps your team alive longer in games. In practice, the rotation looks like this. Pop wings to stabilize or create pressure, normally within the first 30 seconds of the match. Cycle through your Rising Sunlight procs, dumping Infusion of Light procs into Flash of Lights as you go, as much as you possibly can. And when your stacks are about to fall off of Rising Sunlight, or you know more healing pressure is coming up, drop a Divine Toll to refresh them or proc new Rising Sunlights. The big takeaway is simple. Don't overlap these two cooldowns. Play them separately, rotate them smartly, and you'll stretch your defensive power much farther across a match. One thing that you often see me do is when I have 0 holy power and I know a ton of damage is coming up from the enemy team, and I have I'll try to bait a Divine Purpose proc, and I'll hold that Divine Purpose proc into a Divine Toll. So this way I have 5 holy power with a Divine Purpose proc, and if I have a Holy Prism, I just have an infinite amount of ways to spam cast Eternal Flames. When you're playing Herald of the Sun, the single most important rule is this. Never let Holy Shock set at 2 charges if you can help it, and constantly press Holy Prism. Holy Shock is your engine. It generates holy power, provides burst healing, and fuels your entire rotation to allow you to spam cast Eternal Flames, to spread your hots, and to do more and more burst healing throughout the game more effectively. In an optimal long game, you should use your Infusion of Light procs before pressing Holy Shock so you don't waste them. Ideally, spend infusions onto Flash of Lights or the 2 Holy Lights with your Hand of Divinity up. Then Holy Shock again. This keeps your mana efficient while maximizing sustained throughput healing throughout the game. That said, PvP is not scripted. Sometimes the situation demands immediate healing and you'll need to shock before spending infusions. If you have Rising Sunlight procs, Holy Shock jumps to the top of your priority. And if you layer Blessing of Anch with Rising Sunlight, Blessing of Anch increases the healing and damage of your Holy Shock by 200%. It is a random proc from the Herald talent tree. If you have this up, that first Holy Shock will always be your biggest burst heal in your entire kit, followed by 2 additional Holy Shocks if you have up Rising Sunlight. That is probably your biggest burst healing that you can have as a Holy Paladin Herald spec. Those moments you always prioritize Holy Shock over Infusion Weaving if massive healing is required. Important, if massive healing is required. Do not need a ton of healing. You still want to maintain that Holy Flash of Light order. Okay. Keep in mind in Solo Shuffle, dampening ramps up much faster, and you won't reliably be able to weave in Infusion of Light procs the entire game. At certain points late in the game, you will have to just spam Holy Shocks, Eternal Flames, and Holy Prisms non-stop, as the Flashes of Lights are just not enough healing. Now, there's something in this game that I want to go over specifically that you see me do that allows me to adapt to the situation that is going on. You know, I do my normal rotation, I cast Tears, I cast Hand of Divinity, but I notice that their Demon Hunter in the opener pushes up and overextends drastically. In this case, I stop everything that I'm doing and I hodge him LOS of his healer and I pop everything to try to kill him. This in turn forces Nether and Trinket from the Demon Hunter, so that was a worth it trade. Ideally, I should have probably held Wings there. I kind of greeded a little bit on the offense, but I wanted to kill that Demon Hunter in the opener because he was in such a bad spot. The key thing here, guys, is if you ever catch somebody like that in a bad spot and you can hodge them and your partner is on the same page as you, you can often force a ton of cooldowns in the opener by literally doing nothing, just wasting a hodge. When it comes to Holy Power and Eternal Flame, your flow is extremely straightforward. This is why the spec is so easy to pick up and so easy for players to learn from the get-go, but it is hard to master. You're going to start off by building Holy Power with Holy Shocks, Judgments, or Crusader Strikes, or your Flash of Lights, even the Holy Lights that are instant. Note that these 2 abilities, Judgment and Crusader Strike, should never be prioritized over Holy Shock for generating Holy Power. Right? After you generate 3 Holy Power, you will then spend it on Eternal Flames. The general rule of thumb with Eternal Flame is that you'll always want to keep one rolling on the main target that is taking damage on your team, and you want to try to keep one rolling on yourself for passive Light of the Martyr absorb healing when able. The second rule is spread eternal flames on teammates as pressure shifts. You can often ignore healing your second partner if he's just taking slow damage the entire game, and randomly throw an eternal flame on them every now and then as long as they're not dying. Okay? Think of eternal flame as your safety net. Its consistent uptime is the difference between smooth healing and panic healing, right? So you can see here my rogue starting to get swapped on, and I spam swap healing to him. My mage is not really taking damage, so I'm not really paying attention at all, right? My health is not really moving, so I don't really need to eternal flame myself, right? So the main target here, the rogue, now it's swapping to the mage. I eternal flame myself to top myself above 70% health to keep that martyr buff going. I noticed that he bombed to try to go for the kill. The priest is off stun DR, so I rush in and I hodge him in between the blind. This allows us to get a lot more cooldowns with that bomb than if I had not hodged the priest there. Holy Prism. So when it comes to Holy Prism, you don't want to overthink this ability. Just use it on cooldown. Don't overthink it. Every cast pumps AoE damage passively and a massive single target heal and fuels Dawnlight procs, stacking up with huge throughput over the match. Just remember, never Prism if you have a Divine Purpose proc. They do not stack and you'll waste free healing. When it comes to your Judgment and Crusader Strike, Judgment is underrated. It reduces enemy damage, generates holy power, and gives you value while silenced. Leave it in whenever safe. Do not press this ability if your team is low health unless you have literally nothing else. Crusader Strike should only be used when you're already in melee or locked out. Don't ever chase for it. If you're kicked, a Crusader Strike into an Eternal Flame keeps you healing while locked out as Herald. When it comes to your casted heals, you have Flash of Light and Holy Light. You really only want to use these with Infusion of Light procs or Hand of Divinity procs. Otherwise, they're too weak and they're extremely punishable. Light of Dawn, just completely remove it from your bars. You're never going to press this. On the defensive side, everything comes down to cooldown trading. Holy Paladin is insanely durable when you rotate properly, but if you overlap or panic, you'll run dry pretty fast and you'll lose the game instantly. Let's start with the biggest one, which is Divine Shield, aka Bubble, which is always your last resort. Ideally, you pair it with a Hand of Divinity and a Tears Deliverance, so you can pump out big Holy Lights or even land a Clutch Repentance while you're immune. But sometimes you don't have the luxury. Sometimes you're forced to bubble at 1% health just to survive. That's fine. If you do bubble, your priority should be to instantly go to Tears, the Hand of Divinity, into Repentance on the healer if possible. After that, top yourself with Eternal Flame or Holy Shock, and if your bubble is ending, finish it with your 2 instant Holy Lights from Hand of Divinity to stabilize whoever is dying on your team. Blessing of Sacrifice is your bread and butter defensive and should always be used proactively. If you see a setup coming, pre-sack your partner before the CC chain hits. You'll prevent the damage spike entirely instead of trying to heal through it. You can prolong CC chains to help stabilize your team by pressing this button if you know you're about to get CC'd. So if you can see you're fighting a hunter and you see a hunter trap is coming up in 5 seconds, in like 5 or 6 seconds, you can sack and you can prolong the hunter from trapping you. Or you could potentially pre-sack a trap. Blessing of Protection and Spellwarding are matchup dependent. Ideally, you want to use BOP against physical teams, rogues, warriors, pharaohs, hunters. And ideally, Spellwarding you want to use against caster heavy comps. I've got a full breakdown on my channel about which talents to take into which comps, but at high level, just think BOP for melee, Spellwarding for magic. Divine Protection is your short cooldown wall. Press it very often. Don't be greedy. It's there to buy you time in between your big buttons. Lay on Hands is your panic heal, and if you're running the reduced cooldown talent, don't sit on it. use one early so you have another one when dampening ramps up. If you're getting tunneled and can't stabilize, it's okay to lay on hands, bop, or spellward yourself first, then emergency bubble after if you absolutely have to during that forbearance window. Just remember, forbearance can be dangerous. It's better to lay on hands first and let your partner ice block second rather than the other way around. That way, if pressure continues, you still have a safety net. Your partner can still use a defensive during that forbearance window to buy you time for another defensive come up. Finally, Aura Mastery. You want to use this somewhat early, but not too early. If you know you're in for a long game, pressing Aura Mastery in the first minute is fine. It'll be back up later when dampening hits and healing gets harder. The key is to not overlap Aura Mastery with wings or another big defensive. Think of it as your oh shit button for when you can't heal through incoming damage or you need to stabilize during or right before a CC chain. The golden rule here is simple. You'll want to rotate, not overlap. If you're trading cooldowns efficiently and communicating with your team, Holy Paladin has one of the deepest defensive toolkits in the game. Use it right and you'll always have an answer for the next go. When it comes to crown control, what makes Holy Paladin terrifying isn't just the heal, it's the CC chains. Hammer of Justice into Repentance is one of the most powerful kill setups in the entire game. A clean 3DR cycle of Hodge into rep into rep into rep can literally win you a game by itself, especially if it's done at the proper time. The key though is patience. Your number one job is to always heal. Once you're stable and you're not going to lose someone, that's when you start weaving in Hodges and Repentances. If you're newer to Paladin, Blinding Light can be a safer alternative. It's instant, it's AoE, and even though its cooldown is longer, it doesn't leave you vulnerable to interrupts like Repentance does. As a general rule of thumb, you should always run Blinding Light if you have a Hunter or a Mage on your team, since their CC chains pair perfectly with it. Now, Repentance usage depends heavily on the healer you're fighting and the comp you're against. In a matchup like this, where it's LA Shaman, Havoc, DH, Holy Pally, it is nearly impossible to get consistent Repentances off on the healer, right? Now, it also depends on what type of healer it is. For Druids, general rule of thumb is you want to rep after a Hodge or just force them to spam Shapeshift endlessly. Shamans, you want to juke Wind Shear and grounding before committing, and want to, same thing again, spam make them shapeshift. Making a shaman and a druid spam shapeshift the entire game, if you're able to, creates pressure for your team offensively as well, because they're not sitting there spam healing, they're sitting there spam shapeshifting. As far as priest, it's a little bit harder because you have to juke fade, death, fear as well, a bunch of other things like ultimate penance if they're running that, things like that. So it can be quite difficult to get repentances on priests. Evokers, you want to try to wait out their shroud immunity before Hodge repping. It is very hard to land CC on evokers, especially with the new Verdant and Embrace shroud immunity that they have this season, that they can often spam a lot more whenever you have your windows to be able to actually repentance. Monks, you want to position yourself in a way where you can cast rep on them after a Hodge while staying in line of sight of their port, as they can port while stunned to LOS your rep if you're in a bad spot. Versus Paladins is very simple. Just Hodge and rep them before they Hodge and rep you. Very easy. Even if your repentance gets stopped, that's fine. The cast alone forces globals from the enemy, which creates pressure for your team. Ideally, you want to Hodge the healer and then ran at least 1 or 2 repentances afterwards. If you can manage to get a third in that chain, it's often game changing, and it will either win you on the spot or force multiple cooldowns to be used at the same time. But remember, CC isn't just for healers. If your team is under heavy pressure, sometimes it's better to Hodge or rep a DPS to buy time, especially in late dampening or if their healer has 0 mana. You'll always want to make sure your team knows whenever you're repentancing. That way they don't accidentally break it with cleave damage or just by attacking the target you're repping. Never repentance to kill target. That's just wasted globals in most cases, 9 out of 10 times. One of the most underrated plays you can make is splitting your CC. For example, if your DPS swaps to a healer, you can rep one DPS and hodge the other while your team burns the healer down. Or if your partners already have a stun lined up on a healer, you can DR stun them just to secure the chain or peel off their DPS. In almost every single case, unless you're playing with a rogue, you want to try to be the first stun on the healer if you're trying to kill a healer, as you have the longest stun on the team. The golden rule is use CC to create win conditions, not just for the sake of pressing it. If you line it up with your team's goes, Hodge plus Rep is one of the scariest setups in the game. It essentially creates situations where it takes the match from a 3v3 to a 3v2 or even a 3v1 in certain cases. One of the biggest reasons Holy Paladin is so great in PvP is our utility toolkit. Your healing and defensives are strong, but it's these extra tools that win games when used smartly. Let's start with Blessing of Freedom. This spell is often more powerful than just healing in certain situations. Sometimes giving your teammates the ability to kite, line of sight, or max range the enemy prevents more damage than any heal could ever do. Think of Freedom as a proactive way to deny setups and control positioning. Next, we have Blessing of Protection, Spellwarding, and Lay on Hands. These sit somewhere between utility and defensives. They can absolutely save someone in panic moments, but don't forget they're also offensive toolkits. A well-timed bop or spellwarding can shut down the enemy's team kill and attempt and even instantly flip momentum into your favor, giving your DPS room to push in and go aggressive, especially in high dampening situations, right? Where Blessing of Spellwarding makes you completely immune to all magic damage. That is extremely important to use in high dampening situations. A small but important trick against stealth classes is to use the Holy Prism trick. If you cast Prism on an ally while there's a stealth class nearby in stealth, they'll get popped out. It doesn't put you in combat, but it's often enough to ruin their opener. If you do catch a rogue, instantly target them and force combat, otherwise they can still land a sap even out of stealth for a few seconds. Cleansing is another big part of your utility. Versus teams that spread debuffs like Shadow Priests or Boomkins, you want to cleanse on cooldown to prevent massive incoming damage and mitigate it. If you're running a just reward, which you should be, every cleanse also heals, which adds even more value to your cleanses. Against rogues and mages specifically though, you can't just mindlessly cleanse everything. Be deliberate. Save your dispels for key CCs like polymorphs. Your mobility tool is Divine Steed. It is limited, but it's very flexible. If you're the target, use it to kite, reposition, and avoid CC chains. If you're going in on the offense, use Steed to push up, hodge the healer, and then immediately reposition behind a pillar so you can safely cast Repentance without being stopped. Don't just run into the open, hodge, and rep. You'll get interrupted every single time. Finally, don't sleep on Rebuke, which is our kick. Having a reliable interrupt is huge, and you could always have a focused Rebuke macro set up so you can stop cast instantly without switching targets ever. And here's the thing, even if you're unsure, just kick a cast. Kicking almost anything is better than holding it all game and never pressing it. A well-timed Rebuke can completely swing momentum, especially into healers or setup matches. Remember guys, you don't win every single game. Let's go over some quick advanced Paladin techniques. This is where the gap between an average Paladin and a high-rated Paladin really shows. These little tricks are what makes your gameplay from solid to oppressive. We're going to talk about the Holy Prism versus Stealth trick. Don't forget that the Holy Prism trick against stealth classes, if you cast Holy Prism on one of your partners, any stealth class within 30 yards gets popped out automatically. Rogues, druids, hunters, or even mages. It's an amazing way to instantly force combat and ruin openers, or even knock a Resto Druid out of stealth to stop early clones on your healer. Kick baiting. This is one of my favorite things to do as Herald. One of the most important skills you can develop is baiting kicks. A classic example is casting Repentance, Holy Light, or Flash of Light when you're already at 5 Holy Power. Most people kick towards the end of the cast, that's why it's better to cast Flash of Light and bait kick with Flash of Light because it's faster cast, whereas Holy Light, you could spend half the time casting it and nobody will even try to kick you. If they kick you, you lose nothing. You can still spend your Holy Power on Eternal Flame or even Crusader Strike during a lockout. But they've just wasted a kick. I'll do this on purpose. I'll draw interrupts, keep healing through it, and then land a guaranteed rep on a healer once every kick is down. Just make sure you have full Holy Power or at least a Divine Purpose or 3 Holy Power before you bait a kick. That way you can continue to Eternal Flame while you're kicked. When it comes to your Rising Sunlights, your procs are gold. Never let them expire. If your team is full HP, shock an enemy instead just to get value. Overcapping Holy Power is fine, but wasting a Rising Sunlight proc is not. If you've got one about to expire, hit Holy Shock even at full Holy Power rather than dumping into Eternal Flames. Keeping these procs rolling is what separates consistent healing from wasted potential. When it comes to trading defensives, this is the mark of a great Paladin and how well you mirror enemy cooldowns. If a Herald pops Berserk or Incarn, pre-bop their main target. If a Mage combusts, press Aura Mastery or Sack. If an Enhanced Shaman presses Doom Winds, pre-bop again. Red Paladin presses Wings, you press Sack. Shaman presses Ascendant, same thing, you press Sack or Aura Mastery. Trading early smartly and 1-for-1 is how you stay alive in very high pressure matches. Searing Glare is criminally broken when used properly. Patching both DPS and a Glare can completely shut down their kill window. Use it aggressively in openers to deny damage or defensively to stabilize your team. Against warriors, for example, I almost always Glare their opener. 99 out of 100 times, right? So 99 out of 100 times, their globals are always charged into Spear first global. Glare denies this almost instantly. Just be careful if your partner stuns the warrior first, wait for the stun to end, then Glare to avoid DR overlap. Rogue presses Smoke Bomb and you can't get into it fast enough or save your partner, or your partner can't get out. Press Aura Mastery and Searing Glare. These are ways to prevent kill opportunity windows when you can't save your partner by running in range of them. Another really important talent is Light's Revocation. This talent is surprisingly clutch when you're the one under fire. While Revocation, you can bop, Spellward, or lay on hands yourself and then still Divine Shield afterward during the same Forbearance window if needed. That flexibility is massive. It means sometimes it's better to bop or lay on hands yourself first and hold bubble for the next go rather than bubbling early and leaving yourself exposed to dying 30 seconds later with nothing available. Let's talk about one of the most important things about being a healer in this meta. That's having a high rated mindset. At the end of the day, what separates average paladins from high rated paladins isn't just knowing your rotation or when to pop cooldown. It's the mindset that they have, develop, and practice every day. The first thing you have to understand at high level of play is that cooldowns are trades, not panic buttons. Every single enemy ability has an answer, and your job is to line them up properly. If you panic and sack too late, or bubble too early, or overlap your partners, you'll run out of options and lose. If you stay calm, anticipate their goes, and trade evenly, you'll almost always outlast them. Think of it this way: if the enemy presses 1 and you know your number 1 is their counter, then you press it at the same time. If they press 2, your answer is 2. Always think of your toolkit in terms of trades. The hardest part is just learning what answers what. Which enemy cooldowns deserve bubble, which ones deserve sack, which ones can be handled by Aura Mastery or a freedom, which ones... Once you understand those matchups, once you know exactly what your one-to-one trades are, the game becomes much simpler, and you can apply this general rule of thumb to everything in this game. You're no longer guessing, you're executing. That's the mindset that makes you reliable at the highest ratings. You're not scrambling, you're trading deliberately. You always know what's next. Second, get comfortable with baiting and manipulation. Kick baiting, fake casting, and even showing repentance. These aren't wasted globals, they're mind games. You're forcing the enemy to spend interrupts, globals, and even trinkets on your terms, not theirs. That's how you set up guaranteed kill windows. Third, positioning is everything. A paladin who stands in open dies, and a paladin who hugs a pillar and picks their moments to peek are unkillable. Use Steed not just to escape, but to push in, land CC, and immediately tuck back out of the line. Get away from their CC after you finish your CC. The best paladins feel untouchable because they're never in a spot where the enemy can punish them freely. Fourth, embrace discipline over greed. Don't sit on infusion procs, don't let Rising Sunlight stacks expire, don't tunnel vision for a Hodge or a rep if it means your team dies, or you don't press globals while you're chasing for the CC. The best paladins are always thinking one step ahead. If I use this now, what do I have for the next go? And finally, remember that Paladin is about control, not chaos. You bring some of the highest burst healing, the strongest utility, and some of the scariest CC chains in the game. If you use those tools methodically, trading cooldowns smartly, weaving CC into kill setups, and keeping your team stable, you turn every match into a game of your terms. That's the mindset. You're not just reacting, you're dictating. Once you start thinking like that, you'll feel the jump from being a good Paladin to a great one. So, how do I heal when I don't have cooldowns? I've used all my cooldowns, and I don't know what to do now. As a Holy Paladin, your cooldowns are your lifeline. Once you've completely exhausted them, it's usually game over. Our class relies heavily on proper defensive trading, knowing when to press, when to hold, and how to stagger abilities. If you run out of cooldowns without a plan, you'll almost always collapse under pressure and lose. This is why practice and constantly playing the game is so essential to our class. The more you know the meta, the better you will do. But this is where communication becomes just as important as cooldowns themselves. When you recognize you're approaching the bottom of your defensive toolkit, it's often better to call it early and let your team know. By telling your partners, hey, I have nothing left, play safe, they can adjust, rotating their own defensives, kiting or peeling until your cooldowns come back up. This small adjustment can be the difference between losing instantly and surviving enough to reset your cooldowns. The key here is timing. If you only announce that you're out of cooldowns after the enemy team has already committed to a big offensive go, it's already too late. Communication has to be proactive, not reactive. A winning Paladin constantly updates their teammates on when a defensive has been used or is still available. When you're setting up CC, Repentance, Hammer, Justice, Blinding Light, so they can coordinate their damage and their CC themselves. When an enemy team's go is coming, and whether you have answers for it beforehand or during the time. And when you're asking for help, right? Calling for peels, a trinket, or a defensive rotation, saying things like, I will trinket the next go, I will save you next go, save yourself, or use something next go is key here. This level of clarity prevents overlap and it prevents losses like this. Another example would be if you say, I pre-sack their go. Don't use anything. Your DPS won't panic press a cooldown on top of yours. That single call extends your team's total defensive pool, giving you more breathing room and a higher chance of surviving into dampening or the next offensive window. The most successful Holy Paladins treat communication like an extension of their toolkit. Just like cooldowns, words can actually save the game, but only if you use them early, consistently, and with purpose. Let's talk about seasonal blessings real quick, because how you use these can actually really change your throughput and survivability. Most of the time you're going to use all of them on yourself. Blessing of Winter, Spring, and Autumn are generally best kept on you for passive value throughout the match. The only exception is Blessing of Spring, Blessing of Summer. You'll usually run it on yourself, but if one partner is taking all of the damage, like if they're getting tunneled the entire game, or if you know you need massive healing on one target for a specific window, then it can be worth putting Blessing of Spring on that partner instead. In those situations, the throughput increase on them outweighs the self-value of AoE spread throughput healing. Blessing of Summer is the trickiest one, because it's more situational. In the opener, I usually throw it on myself. The reason is simple. I already have so much raw healing with Wings, Tears, and Hand of Divinity that I don't need more throughput healing from Blessing of Summer. By Summer for the extra damage instead. But as the game goes on, Summer is almost always better used on a DPS partner, right? That extra damage and extra healing loop really helps sustain your team over a long match. One important note is never use Summer on pet classes. It doesn't work properly with them, so don't Summer Hunters, Monks, Demorlocks. Instead, the best Summer targets are Warriors, Rogues, Shamans, Demon Hunters, and Death Knights. If you're not sure, just put it on your DPS partners every single time. In fact, against teams with heavy CC openers like Rogue, Mage, or Hunter comps, I recommend summering your DPS in the opener right away. That way, while you're locked down in CC, your team is still getting extra healing funneled in, which lets you hold onto your trinkets or greed defensives a little bit longer. Big takeaway here is, blessings are flexible, but default them to yourself unless the situation clearly calls for boosting a teammate. And always be mindful of who can actually benefit from Summer. Put it on the right DPS and it'll do way more for your team than you'd ever expect. Instead of going over a fully in-depth positioning guide, I'll try to make this section quick. You can use this as a base general rule of thumb when it comes to any sort of positioning on any map in any arena. You want to always try to max range the enemy healer in almost all cases, aside from when you're going in to CC them. So if their healer is fighting on Skull, and your partners are fighting on Star, and the enemy is around Star, you have a couple different options here. You can stay here, spam heal your partners over and over, and keep dipping in and out, in and out, in and out, spam line of sighting. If the enemy pushes up, you can either go left or you can go right. Going left allows you to line of sight the enemy more and have them either go this way or to the left. The second option is you can reposition yourself from this pillar, or that pillar. You can take this pillar to be a little bit more offensive to their healer, right? Still spam line of sighting the enemy, spam healing your partners, spam healing your partners. Whenever you want to go in for CC on their enemy healer, if you're here or here, for example, first thing you're going to want to do is either free them yourself and horse run in. Freedom, horse run in, hodge the healer right here. Now, most healers will try to Repentance right here or Blinding Light right here, right? So if you're playing Repentance, you'll try to cast and CC them here. You do not want to do this because the enemy team is right here, for example, or here, and they can stop you. In this situation, what you want to do is you want to position yourself in a way to where you can Repentance the healer reliably without being stopped. So for example, if I'm here, their healer's here, I Freedom Horse, I hodge him, I would reposition myself right here. I can still cast Repentance on the healer from the line of sight, but if the enemy is here or here or here, they cannot stop me. I can get guaranteed Repentances and CC on their healer. Another example that we're going to use here, we're going to pretend that Skull is their enemy healer. Star is where our team is fighting. We're either going to be positioned on triangle or over here to the left. If their healer decides to move to circle and you're on triangle, you're going to move over here, line of sighting their healer, but still being in line of sight of your team and healing your team. Or you're going to take diamond or skull. In this case, what I would do is I would either move here to the left of triangle, or I would go reposition on diamond. If I have CC, I'm going to go CC their healer and then reposition on diamond or skull. Most ideally, either opposite of diamond or diamond itself. Always constantly max ranging their healer. If the healer is constantly chasing me the entire game, I'm just going to drag them non-stop, pillar to pillar to pillar. And I'm only going to cross. So the only time I would cross here is if I have Freedom Horse, or even here if I have Horse, right? Because you never want to cross in a position where you can get slowed or CC'd, because then you're just going to be stuck here permanently and you're going to be spam CC'd. Holy Paladin has a handful of abilities that technically exist in PvP, but you'll almost never use them outside of very specific situations. Consecration can sometimes be useful for breaking stealth. If a rogue or druid runs through it, they'll get popped out if they don't have any form of absorb on themselves. But outside of that, you should basically never prioritize. It's not worth the global in PvP in any situation. Taunt is surprisingly effective in certain matchups. For example, if you're not getting trained by a hunter, you can taunt their pet to drag it away from their kill target. This can temporarily stop the hunter from landing certain abilities if they're Beastmaster spec. And some of their abilities require the pet to be in range. It's a niche move, but it can buy your team a few seconds of breathing room when used at the right times. Light of Dawn has absolutely no place in PvP, just take it off your bars entirely. It's slow, efficient, and you'll never find a real moment where it outperforms your other heals. Plus, it's extremely short range. Shield of Righteousness or Denounce also falls into the almost never category. Denounce is just not worth picking the PvP talent, and the only time you should ever press Shield of Righteousness is if you happen to be in melee range at the time and the enemy kill target is at something like 2 or 3% health. Even then, it's a desperation move. It's not really a core part of your kit. While these abilities technically exist, the reality is that Holy Paladin PvP rotation is built around Holy Shock, Eternal Flame, Infusion procs, Holy Prism, and your actual defensive and offensive cooldowns. Everything else is just a filler and it's extremely niche. Let's talk about the healing mentality in WoW and why healing feels so hard. Healing in World of Warcraft is very different from DPSing or tanking. You're judged more on mistakes rather than successes, and one death often gets pinned on you, even if it wasn't your fault. You carry the weight of keeping everyone alive, but much of your impact is invisible. No one sees the damage you prevented, only the health bars that drop to 0. On top of that, you're constantly making split decision calls with incomplete information, sometimes predicting damage before it even happens. Unlike DPS rotations, healing is never static. It changes every fight, every pull, every second. That pressure can easily build into a sort of losing mentality if you let it erode confidence. The losing mentality is, it's a healer stuck in this mindset that tends to internalize every death, tilt after mistakes, and panic when things get hectic. They may avoid queues out of fear of being the reason their team fails. Instead of thinking about growth, they focus only on survival, just keeping people alive, while ignoring efficiency, cooldown usage, or positioning. This mindset often leads to burnout and frustration, making healing feel more like a burden rather than a challenge. This is not fun, guys. The winning mentality, right? This is when good healers build resilience. It's all a mindset. That's why it's called mindset. They take accountability without guilt, analyzing what went wrong without attaching blame. They embrace chaos, staying calm when health bars drop to 0, even if you lose or win. And they know they can't always save every single person every single time. Confidence is in their toolkit, which allows them to recognize when a DPS dies to their own mistake and move on to the next round. A winning healer often becomes the anchor of the team, managing resources like chess pieces in a certain way, thinking several moves ahead. Most importantly, they stay patient, seeing every death as a lesson, not a failure, as a way to improve for next time. Practical tips that you can use to build a winning mentality that I've used over the years are to refrain blame. Ask not what you could have done better, but what others could have as well. Detach your ego. A death is not shameful, it's just information on how to improve next time. Celebrate your success. Notice your clutch saves even if no one else does. Know your limits. Not everything is healable. Embrace the challenge. Healing is harder than DPSing, and that's what makes mastering it so satisfying. Stay composed. Reset after mistakes instead of spiraling. Focus on the fundamentals no matter how good you are at this game. Good positioning and awareness often matters more than raw output. Accept mistakes. Every top healer has lost before. Learn, adapt, and move forward. Manage your mental energy. Take breaks whenever fatigue sets in or you're not having fun. And play proactively. Anticipate damage instead of only reacting to it. Healing requires one of the strongest mindsets in WoW. You'll get blamed, you'll get tested, and you'll often be the final line between defeat and victory. But that pressure is what makes healing so rewarding. That's what makes it so satisfying. The same way that breaks others is what forges the best healers. Healing isn't just about keeping health bars full, it's about leadership, composure, and resilience, right? A true healer thrives under pressure, turning every setback into fuel to keep getting better and keep improving every single time they play. When it comes to auras, the default choice is almost always Devotion Aura. This is your bread and butter aura in PvP, and you'll be running it in nearly every single matchup. The key interaction here is with Aura Mastery. Anytime you press Aura Mastery with Devotion Aura active, you give your teammate a massive damage reduction window, and that's one of the strongest defensive buttons you have. There are some niche situations where aura juggling can be valuable. For example, against rogues, swapping into concentration aura to reduce the duration of their silences by 30% can actually save games. The important detail here though is that when you hit aura mastery, you always want devotion aura active, even against rogues. The reduction from aura mastery plus devotion aura is simply too powerful to give up. A neat trick I have is if a rogue drops a smoke bomb on your partner, you can pop aura mastery with devotion aura, and that teammate will take reduced damage inside the bomb. If you can't reach the bomb in time to save your partner, or your partner can't get out, Searing Glare is another great answer to help neutralize that go. The bottom line is stick with Devotion Aura for most games, juggle it situationally if you're confident, but never forget Aura Mastery belongs with Devotion Aura. That combination is one of the strongest defensives in the game. You can also juggle between auras using an aura macro so that you never accidentally turn off an aura when you're juggling. I'll have this link down in the description. Basically, you can spam this and you can spam juggle between auras. So if you press the same aura a second time, it will actually turn it off completely until you press it a third time. So sometimes you can accidentally turn off your auras if you don't juggle properly. Let's touch on races real quick. At the end of the day, your race is never going to make or break your paladin, but it can give you small edges that add up over time, and honestly, I live by the look good, play good motto. If you like how your character looks, you'll play better. That said, here's how the races rack up. In S tier, which is best in slot, we're going to have humans, Draenei. For humans, you get a 2% more secondary stat across the board. This works for every secondary stat from gear. For example, if you're running 20,000 mastery, as a human, you'll actually have 20,400. This is a noticeable throughput bump. As Draenei, this gives you a passive main stat buff and Gift of the Nar, which is a free semi-short CD heal you can throw on yourself or teammates. It's simple, effective, and efficient. As for A tier, we have Dark Iron Dwarf. Fireblood is basically a pseudo trinket, purging silences, dots, or roots while giving you a temporary main stat buff. This is great into classes like Shadow Priest, Druids, but it's very situational, even Assassination Rogues. On the Horde side, we have Torrens. War Stomp is a reliable AoE stun that can interrupt casts, peel melee, or even set up Repentance Goats. You can War Stomp into triple DR Repentances. For B tier, we have decent but playable races. We have Blood Elf. Arcade Torrent removes one beneficial effect. It's useful in certain situations, but it's very short range and overall lower value compared to Torrent. The passive crit from this race is decent. And then you have Alliance, you have Dwarf. For Dwarf, you have Stoneform, which is a cheap version of Dark Iron Dwarf racial, but it benefits differently. This removes bleeds, poisons, and diseases, so it's very good into rogues, pharaohs, that type of classes. But outside of these matchups, it's weaker overall. And for Horde side, you have Zandalari Troll. It has decent sustainability with the Pact of the Loa choices, and nothing really game-changing in the top PvP, but you get a passive 5% movement speed, which is pretty good in Blitz, but that's about it. Any other race that was not posted here is pretty much Z tier. It's bad, it's non-optimal. Doesn't really provide anything relevant from PvP. When it comes to your add-ons, macros, and setup, I'm not going to go super deep into macros and add-ons here because I already have a fully in-depth guide on my channel. I have a full video guide dedicated to these topics on my channel, so go check that out. If you want the complete breakdown of my setups from focus macros, mouse over healing, arena 1 to 3 keybinds, all the way to the exact add-ons and UI I use, check out my How to Get Better at WoW guide and my full add-on guide on my channel. Both will be linked down in the description below this video. Holy Paladin is one of the most rewarding healers in WoW. Yes, it punishes poor cooldown trades, but once you master positioning, CC chains, and advanced tech like kickbaiting or sacred weapon redistributions, or just how to properly trade your cooldowns defensively and offensively wise, you can carry games at the highest levels. What makes Paladin so special is it's deceptively simple. It's easy to pick up, but with one of the highest skill cap ceilings in the game. The more you learn to weave your toolkit together, the more unstoppable you feel and become. If you're new, start with Herald of the Sun. Focus on the fundamentals, keep Holy Shock on cooldown, keep Eternal Flames rolling, and trade defensives properly. Herald is where you build the foundation. Lightsmith is something to explore later once you've mastered the basics. Don't let anyone convince you Herald can't push to top tiers. It absolutely can. I've done it myself. Most importantly, don't panic. Even when you feel behind, keep pressing buttons. Use wings, freedom, sack, always keep globals rolling. Paladins thrive on proactive trades, not sitting on cooldowns forever. If you're unsure in the moment, press something. Casting is always better than freezing up and pressing nothing. If you learned something from this guide, do me a favor. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and check me out live at twitch.tv/KillaKTV. I'm live whenever I play. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.